I'm Joe, and thanks for attending our Workshop Wednesday session for December. We've got a nice presentation today for you about some upcoming changes to Fleet Commander, and I hope you find them, interesting and of use. Today's subject is dedicated to our version 5.1 release. So we'll be covering, new features, expanded features, changes to the system, and there's some really cool stuff that's part of this release moving forward. So hope you enjoy it. Um, as always, from our introduction standpoint, this is our monthly knowledge series. So we do this every month, always the third Wednesday of the month from 2 to 3 Eastern. So that way you can plan on it. We do hope that, you'll give us some feedback because your feedback is what drives the program moving forward. In this presentation, there's a QR code at the very end of the deck. And if you use your smartphone, you can scan it as it appears on the screen, and it'll bring you to a survey, and we'd like your ability to respond to the survey. Okay. We're also going to throw a survey link in the chat. So whichever way you do it, your feedback is certainly welcome. Uh, as you've probably been advised, this webinar is being recorded, and once the webinar is over and we have the download, we'll make that available along with a copy of the deck that's presented. Um, Everybody has been muted for the webinar, so if you do have a question, we're going to encourage you to use the chat. And so if you're familiar with Teams, I think most folks are, you'll find that on the very top of your menu. And, please click the chat. You can type a message, tell us who you are, what organization you're with, and what your question is. And John's going to be managing the queue as we go forward. Okay, so thanks for that. So today's agenda. So, fundamentally, we're going to cover, kind of new product feature overview, product enhancements and updates, reporting enhancements, platform modernization, the release schedule, and we'll get into some, of our standard CS tools, talking about the tools to help you succeed, within your organization and your fleet, address any questions, and then wrap up with, participation in the survey. So, again, thanks so much for that. I think a lot of you folks know, Fleet Commander is a cloud-based application, and it really gives you great flexibility in terms of managing your fleet anytime, anywhere, quickly and efficiently. It's a modular application, so some of you folks, use it from a motor pool vehicle sharing standpoint, and some use it with key management or without, but again, other important aspects of Fleet Commander are maintenance management, fuel management, risk management, and GPS and telematics integration. So if you are a client and you're using GPS Insight or GeoTab for telematics, Fleet Commander does have, native webhook integrations with those providers. So we'd encourage you to reach out to us, and, we're happy to kind of help you there. Okay. Um, from a new product feature standpoint, so one of the things that we've been working on within Agile is total cost of ownership. And so in version 509, we introduced the overall framework of what TCO is. And then in version 510, we've continued to adapt and expand it. So we've got some really great new features for it. And again, that includes, configurable custom TCO field labels, and, aggregating data on a TCO tab. We've got, improvements made to the cost allocation tool. So we talked a little bit about that last time, and we'll get into more depth today. And what that allows now is for addition of replacement fund calculations. Some folks refer to that as depreciation, but fundamentally it allows you to, charge out, your vehicle over some defined timeline. We've got the ability to aggregate lots of different data in the TCO expense summary. So, that includes your maintenance, your fuel, your other, miscellaneous expenses, depreciation, insurance, overhead. So, you know, TCO really is your one place where you can look at a vehicle and truly understand exactly what its life costs are. And then, lastly, a TCO data dump report. So again, it gives you a nice way to get data out of the system when you want to do some analysis about what your fleet is, how it's performing, what your costs are, from a total life cycle management standpoint. Okay. The first thing that we want to talk about is, the new tab for TCO. So previously, um, we had a way where we can manage some of the expenses, but what we've done here is we've aggregated, certain settings for TCO underneath enterprise settings. So this gives you one place in the system where you can globally define how you're going to manage TCO parameters in Fleet Commander. When you look at the import asset identifier, what that allows you to do is it allows you to configure and specify whether you want to use the asset name, the VIN, or a license number and import. So you should always keep some level of consistency. You shouldn't be changing those up every month. So if you decide, that you want to do it by VIN, that's a good way to do it because it's always a unique identifier. Things like monthly insurance rate and monthly overhead rates. So these are really interesting cost elements because what they do is in Fleet Commander is we give you the ability where if you have most folks that have insurance or most folks that self-insure, what they'll do is they'll have a standard fixed rate that they want to charge every vehicle, every active vehicle in the system, or they have a policy that's global for the enterprise, and it might be 10,000, 100,000, or something in between. And so, you can select whether you want to do it a cost per vehicle or, take a global amount and divide it across all your active vehicles. And so it gives you some great flexibility there. On the monthly overhead, everybody that manages a fleet has overhead, and that's typically the department. So what this allows you to do is specify whether you've got a standard rate, for a vehicle or whether you want to liquidate costs on a monthly basis. In many folks, when they look at the monthly overhead rate, what they'll do is they'll, have a standard cost that they want to liquidate every month so that they end up with a, kind of a um, zero balance at the end of the year. And then lastly, we allow you to create a wide variety of custom fields to bring in other data. So if you're going to import data from other systems, and again, it can be almost anything, you can define certain fields, within TCO and capture certain kinds of data, and then bring that into Fleet Commander and then export it back out. So this gives you a way where you can, call things, very specifically, within the application. Okay. And the next thing that we've done is we've reorganized the vehicle data. So by looking at the vehicle data, you'll see that we've reorganized, that main form within Fleet Commander. And so what this does is it really gives you the user, a better grouping of related information. Previously, when you looked at it, some of the fields were in different parts of the application or in different parts of the form. And so what we're trying to do is make it more logical and easier to use. So we've linked things like availability together, where you've got acquisition dates, first available dates, last available dates, and disposal dates, as well as then the depreciation information. So account numbers, what you bought it for, how long you expect to use it in months, how many miles, if you've got a salvage value or not, and if you've got a CPI increase. So all of these are important when you think about, replacement fund, fundamentally in terms of how you, project the costs for your vehicles moving forward, especially on the CPI side, because most folks today, when you think about, the cost model, they'll say, well, I bought it for, X dollars, $10,000 as an example. And what they're going to do is they're going to try and liquidate that $10,000 over some period, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, et cetera, and some miles. Um, and they don't typically have a CPI in there. So what the CPI does is it protects you and it charges really the anticipated cost of the vehicle that's going to replace your existing vehicle. Um, so those are really great things to do. And then you can also see that we've got a little field that says don't depreciate. So in some cases, you may take a vehicle, you may have it in the fleet, and you may want to suspend depreciation. So what you can do is you can go in there and you can select that, and what that allow you to do is suspend depreciation for some period of time. Okay. In terms of the cost allocation tool and how it works, again, we've talked about, it uses specific fields on the asset profile, and so you make that selection globally. And as you make that selection globally, what you'll see is, especially for the rate and the overhead, you're going to see what those selections are in terms of the cost allocation tool. So depreciation is set up by vehicle. Overhead is globally within Fleet Commander, and insurance is globally within Fleet Commander. Excuse me. And then for the allocation period, what we're able to do is we can define the period. And so in this case, you can see it's August 22 to August 22. So that implies it's the first day of the month to the last day of the month. So we're always doing equal month, the equal period, or I should say the complete month, rather than partial periods in the month. Okay. Then the next thing is, again, we talked a little bit on the other slide about do not depreciate. So, again, this is always important because again, sometimes people have seasonal vehicles, sometimes people have vehicles that they want to take out of service for whatever reason for a short period of time, and this gives you, the opportunity to suspend replacement fund or depreciation activity while it's not being used. Now, the calculations in creating replacement fund are always, always an interesting thing to talk about and to look at. So, when we think about, what fully depreciated means is you've got, the acquisition cost plus any expected increase, times the acquisition value less the salvage value times the acquisition value. So again, there's a number of different parameters that are going in to creating what that calculation looks at on a regular basis. Okay. And so again, you can see here that we get into the acquisition value, and you can see that as we go through, you can see exactly what those parameters are. Okay. And when we look at the expected cost increase, so the expected cost increase, again, you can see that that's really your CPI. So the system gives you the ability where you can, where you can program in 2, 3, 4, 5% increase. And when you think about where we are in inflation these days, that's always a very important aspect of managing your fleet to make sure that you've got enough money put aside, from a capital standpoint to replace your vehicles if you are self-funding. Okay. And again, you can see that, net, what we're doing is we're taking the acquisition value and we're calculating the salvage value in the model based on its original price, and then the salvage value, while we default it can be anything that you want. So it's obviously variable by vehicle. We're not setting it as a global setting within Fleet Commander. So it really gives you the ultimate flexibility in terms of managing the fleet, you know, to suit your specific needs. And that's important when you think about light duty versus medium duty versus heavy duty, because light duty vehicles, those might, last 5 or 6 year, 120,000 miles, whereas more complex asset, heavy duty assets, you're going to be running those 10, 12, 15 years, 150, 200,000 miles, if not more. Okay. And so, as you look at, creating this, once we work through all of those parameters, that is what's ultimately going to determine the monthly rate that gets charged by the system. Okay. And then again, we've talked about, parameters such as the months and the miles. And again, those are aspects. It's really the months that you're depreciating it off. And so, when you think about it, especially, from a public fleet standpoint, you typically, operate under GASB 34, in terms of what that data looks like. Um, Now, when you get into depreciation, there's a couple things that you need to be aware of. And that is, for the first month, it's based on the first available date. So when we talk about, when do you start it, when do you end it, it's always first available date. That's what the system uses to decide when that asset is really put into service. Okay. And then if you look at this, um, you can see that, on the monthly depreciation where we don't charge it, if you change the status of a vehicle from, either uh, available or unavailable, as long as it's not deleted, the depreciation can be charged, right? So you get into a situation where you can say, gee, the asset isn't available. I don't want to depreciate it, so I would set the do not depreciate flag. And then once I bring it back to available, we can then change that flag and it'll start up again. Okay. And so I think as you consider your fleet, there's a lot of different parameters that come into play when you start calculating, depreciation / replacement fund in terms of how it's used. The other thing too is that once the vehicle reaches its, fully amortized rate, the system will stop charging it. So if you're programming a vehicle and you want to recover $10,000, the system will only recover $10,000. It's not going to recover 10,500 or 11,000 or anything at. It's only going to recover up to the parameters that you put into the system. And that's really important because, again, as you think about this, the job of replacement fund at the end of the day is to make sure that the fleet, has sufficient, um, you know, revenue on hand to replace a vehicle. So however you liquidate that vehicle cost out and then recover for it, that's what it's trying to do at the end of the day, is make sure that you've got enough money to replace that with a like vehicle. Not so much a better vehicle, but a like vehicle. And that's typically how the model works. Obviously you could increase the CPI if you do want to replace it with a better vehicle and just put away more money on a monthly basis. So, that's one thing to consider when you're thinking about TCO and what that means for you. In this case, when you talk about, a fully depreciated vehicle, if it was fully depreciated, at $24,000, what you're going to find is, if you don't have an even dollar amount to be charged, so let's say you were charging $100 a month for a vehicle, and let's say that there was only $50 left to charge in that final month, um, you're only going to charge that incremental $50. You're not going to charge $100. So the system's got some enforcements built in to make sure that you only hit, again, the total value and not overcharge for the vehicle. Uh, the next thing that we get into is, once we've got all this data into the system, it's getting data out of the system. And so, you know, like many other Fleet Commander reports, we've got the ability to export a wide variety of information about, the vehicle, and in this case, all of the TCO expenses. The nice thing about this is that it's a very flexible portal where you can define, you know, the expense report summary. You can define, the expenses by vehicle. You can output it into HTML or Excel, so you can do other things in it. It contains vehicle and mileage information so that you're able to get into, cost per mile details. And the other thing that we do is we group, certain expenses together, such as maintenance and fuel. So one of the things that you want to do at the end of the day is to try and take a look at your direct operating expenses versus your variable operating expenses. And you can see it's a pretty good size report. So, there's lots and lots of different columns of data in there. And you can see in some cases here, we've got, unlike the other one, where we had maintenance and fuel, you can see here we've got, as well as other vehicle expenses, we've got depreciation, overhead, insurance. If you're capturing things like warranty refund, it's really going to give you a great visibility in terms of the vehicle, how it's performing, and then what your total cost for the period is. And then, certainly over life, you can see what your, total miles are, as well as your cost per mile in the periods that you've selected. So really, really cool, great information about how you're doing things. The other thing is that, when you look at the dump report, so the dump report is kind of interesting, because this is what gives you, um, kind of a nice compact way to take a look at your data within the application. So what it does is it gives you kind of that rolled up look about, what that vehicle is. And again, like other reports in Fleet Commander, you can generate it in HTML. So again, it's a web page, or you can generate it in Excel. And you can see here you've got a lot of those flexible, um, custom fields, where if you had, brought in certain kinds of fields against it, you can see exactly what those are. Okay. And again, this includes, work order numbers and fuel transaction ID if you're using that. So it really gives you some very specific history about what that asset is and the level of detail. And again, this is just another example of some of the levels of detail where you get into the, external invoices date, quantities, rates, taxes, discounts, markups, if applicable, as well as posting information about the transaction itself. So whether the transaction was posted in the system, or whether it's still open. On the product side, getting into, additional product enhancements. This next one is a biggie. And this gets us into, or I should say, down the path of configurable OAuth. So, for those of you that know this, OAuth is an open authorization way to validate, um, access to systems in an organization. Now, you got to be really careful with OAuth, especially if you've got users in the system today and they all have user IDs. So, the caveat here is always, 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 before you attempt to do this at home, please make sure you contact our support folks and talk to them about what you want to do, because you really need to really have a deep understanding of OAuth and how it works. And as I said, typically when you get into configuring things like single sign-on, OAuth being one of those types, um, typically the user ID is generally different than what the user ID is, stored in FleetCommander. Sometimes the usernames are an email address. Sometimes it's a first initial last name. Sometimes it's a name. Sometimes it's a random ID. And so if you enable OAuth and those two values are not identical, then it's going to cause some issues within the system. So you got to be really, really careful about that. The other thing is that it's important to really understand that OAuth does not update user information. So it's really just meant to say, does this user exist? If they do, it allows them to have access into the application. Okay. Once they pass your validation protocols. Um, in order to look at the configuration within Fleet Commander, this is another setting that's underneath enterprise settings on the advanced tab. So again, you can see it. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the fields that are in there, but fundamentally, that's where you go to look at it. And again, it's really, really, really important that you must have the necessary understanding and required information to successfully enable it. I know in our experience dealing with many different IT organizations, it usually takes a little bit of time for somebody to get all of their data together and make sure that they have the right data to configure this. So again, you really do need to contact, our support folks to make sure it works. This is a sample of, just some of the settings that are in the system, and you can see that, there are things defined as the scope, claims, different endpoints from an authorization and from a token standpoint, what the keys are that are being used, where the redirects come into place. And then when you're doing your redirects, both within Fleet Commander and the kiosk, those are segregated into discrete parameters. So lots of information here and lots of detail here, and it must be 100% accurate to work. So please reach out if you want to try this, and we'll set up some time to have that conversation. This is a nice little feature that we've changed now, and that is page titles. So, previously when you got onto the welcome page, you were kind of stuck with whatever we gave you. So if we decided we were going to call it instructions, policies, contact us, etc., that's pretty much what you had. And so what this allows you to do now is dynamically change those page titles, within Fleet Commander. So, as we look at this today, you can see that, underneath enterprise settings, um, we've got, both the layout tab and the policy tab. So we're showing you the policy tab right now. But fundamentally, if you navigate to the layout tab, what's going to happen is you're going to have the ability to change all of those page titles or all of those titles underneath information, with the exception of policies. The policy title remains underneath the policy tab because that's where all the data exists for your motor pool policies. So, where you've got something that may previously say, policies, um, you can change it to motor pool policies, and that's what the users are going to see both on the menu and within the application. So it really is nice because, again, it gives you that little bit of extra configurability within Fleet Commander, makes it a little bit more personalized for you. It helps people really understand, your nomenclature. And so it's a little bit, from an ease of use standpoint, it just makes things, so much easier at the end of the day. Always make sure you save any of your changes. Okay. The other thing that we can do is, or you can do is, you can change your images. So, within Fleet Commander, we've got a logo up in the top main page. And what this allows you to do is it allows you again on the advanced tab to upload a custom logo. So if you get tired of your logo and you want to make some changes, this gives you the capability to do it. You can see that and again, you would go under, configure enterprise settings in advanced. From the standard image types, again, we're looking at image related files. So, PNG, JPEG, and GIF, so we don't recommend animated. So this is non-animated GIFs. And again, we'll give you, kind of specific, sizes for the image. So, try and keep to the sizes because again, one of the things that you'll find is if you upload a really, really big image, it's going to have an impact in terms of how the page presents in the web page. So, always nice to be able to do that on your own. And I can tell you that, as John, Kathy, and myself have gone and visited clients, a lot of folks, want to update their logos. Some have, excuse me, some have logos that have been old, been around for a while, and the organization has maybe refreshed it or changed it, and this gives you a really easy way where you can go off and do that. Okay. And then lastly is we made some changes to the policy acceptance button. So previously it used to be on the left hand side of the page, and we've reoriented that to the middle to make it easier. So that way it's kind of more out there, and it's just easier from a usability standpoint, and also clarified the verbiage. So hopefully that helps the user at the end of the day get through their policies and then agree to the terms of it. Okay. Um, Managing fuel imports, in making and managing reservations. So, we've tried to make some changes to, both the fuel and fuel imports. And so one of the things is that as we start getting into some of the bigger files, we've gone through and made some, code changes to optimize how the files process. So, hopefully, for folks that are using fuel and fuel imports, you'll see a marked difference in terms of how those imports process now moving forward with 510. And then in terms of making and managing reservations, what you're going to find is we've tried to clarify, where required fields are, within it, because again, it's just makes it easier for the end user. Now they can see, exactly what's needed from them. And so what we've done is we've added asterisks, to department and account if they are required. So again, you do have a way where you can make those optional when you set your system up. So again, if it's required, you're going to see asterisks, and if it's not, you won't. Okay. Um, the next one is one that I like because as we talk to different clients using Fleet Commander and especially sharing vehicles, one of the things that we get into on a very regular basis is um, various staff members making reservations for other users. So, one of the things that we've done is we've added a kind of a setting within the application where we can either allow that or disallow that. And it's something you want to consider. So, if you really want to make this self-service at the end of the day, so that somebody goes in, they make their own reservations, they get assigned a vehicle, et cetera. You can certainly, um, unselect this, or deselect this, and that way other users won't be able to make reservations on behalf of others. And again, it gets into a situation where if somebody is making a reservation on behalf of somebody else, do they really know whether or not, everybody is properly licensed? Are they authorized to drive the right level of vehicle? And so there are some concerns in terms of letting people make reservations for other folks. And so I think it's something that you want to consider from a policy standpoint, and then update your system accordingly. But this is something that you can change. And again, it's underneath configure enterprise settings and reservations. So it's enabled by default so that when you look at it, and this is essentially what's happening here. So when you allow it, you can see that I can select it's for me or it's for somebody else. And then when it's disabled, so unchecked, the driver can only make a reservation for themselves. So again, this should match up with what your fleet policy is and whether or not you want to allow folks to make reservations for other folks or not. And this gives you a way to control that. And then, one of the next thing we did is just kind of cleaned up some of the text, or I should say some of the helps. So when you look at text and you want to add messages, you can see that we've moved that just to make it a little bit easier, because again, sometimes some of these things get lost, especially on a page, if it's a long page. And so we've taken that, press shift enter message and put it up in the top left. So just try and make it a little bit more usable. Other things that we've done here, in terms of the product and some enhancements, and fixes, is we've had some issues where, usernames could be duplicated under, specific under some pretty rare circumstances. Generally speaking, in Fleet Commander, you cannot have more than one of the same username. So, there is a restriction in the system for that. And at some point, that was being allowed. So we've corrected that issue. And again, getting into fuel imports, fuel mapping, we've made some changes to improve the accuracy of that data. So again, it's really designed to improve the accuracy of the transactional charges as they relate to your billing charges. So if you are using fuel and you are importing files and you are trying to get those to tie back out into your billing, this should help improve that process significantly. Okay. Reporting. So on the report side, we've made, a number of different changes in the reports. And again, as you go through different iterations of Fleet Commander, whether it's, version 8, version 9, version 10, and then in the future, you're going to find us continue to refine reports. And so the following interfaces have been, changed, in the version 5.10 release. And specifically on the vehicle usage reports, where we've added, columns for the site and VIN to output. And again, those are to output, and those are really important because as you look at this, it's always nice to see which site that vehicle is related to, especially when you're trying to do some analytics on it. Okay. On the utilization by miles report, again, we've added statuses to the filters, and again, that helps you, improve the granularity of the report, because again, in some cases, in the prior report, you were just getting everything, and this is going to help you fine tune it. Completed reservation summary. There was an issue with, some of the asset filters not filtering correctly. So we fixed that. On the travel sheet, we had an issue where there were some conversions, some inaccurate time date conversions that were happening. So specifically universal time to local time wasn't generating correctly. So what this is going to do is this is going to, correct those incorrect time conversions. Um, excuse me, usage by department. So again, this is, was to improve the error handling of it, number one, and also make it more accurate. So we had some issues where the report wasn't presenting you with the right level of data. And then last but not least, late return report. So this one, there was an issue where the hours late, um, weren't including some data. So it was leading to some incorrect calculations, and that's been corrected as well. So lots of things going on there. From a platform standpoint, um, I think a lot of you folks know, as we get into Fleet Commander, Agile has invested significant, money, resources, and effort to modernize the platform, at no additional cost to folks. And we think that's really important for you as our clients. So, as we go through Fleet Commander, every time you get a version or release of Fleet Commander, it's better. It's better in a number of different ways. It's more secure. It's more robust. Reports are generated faster. The quality of data is improved. And, when we look at some of these things specifically, all of these areas have been rewritten, into the new framework so that these are all in .NET now, instead of in the old classic ASP. And so, it just continues adding to the list of all of the reports that are within Fleet Commander. And so we got, user summary, user detail extra, user detail, account summary, department, etc. And so, lots and lots of information, in all, more robust. certainly. And again, because it's .NET, they generally work faster, which is great. The functionality is unchanged. So as we go through, I think it's important just to recognize that if we in testing, if we do find some issues, we do try and correct issues as we go along with this. Okay. And again, these are just some additional ones. So lots and lots of reports that have been done. And I can assure you that, when you get into some of these, the code is quite complicated, and it takes quite a bit, to get these rewritten because of the programming language differences. Okay. So the release schedule, you know, right now, we've released, kind of the final release candidates to our beta community. So if you're in our beta program, chances are you've gotten a notification from us about a pending release. And if it's something that you'd like to try and join our beta program, certainly reach out to us, and we're happy to see what we can do to accommodate you. For all Agile hosted clients. So once we get through all final testing and have the final version of production cut, um, we expect to start releasing to our hosted sites in mid-January. Typically what we'll do is, and again, for those of you who have been through this in the past, what we do is we do rolling releases. And so I would expect that, from mid-January into maybe the very early part of February is when your site will be updated into 5.10. And then for self-hosted clients, we expect to make the release candidate available to you in late February. Might be a little bit earlier than that, but right now, late February is looking at the right timeline. And again, the goal of that is to make sure that uh, the releases is with all Agile clients first, and that way it gives us a little bit broader participation in case something does crop up. We want to make sure that we address it. But I can assure you that given the amount of testing that we do, the candidate that we're going to be releasing in mid-January is a very high quality. Okay, and then just a couple of other things. So, every month we talk about this, and we want to encourage you to tell your story. And so when you think about Fleet Commander and what Fleet Commander allows you to do, it gives you that capability where you can draft and distribute, announcements. And again, these are things that we can help you on in terms of documenting your successes. And so whether it's creating a slide deck of what your accomplishments are, and identifying your successes. Everybody likes to save money. Everybody likes to look in and say, hey, this is what we did last year, and here's how we made the fleet better or contributed to the organization or to the staff. And so we would strongly encourage you that if you have a great story to tell, and I know a lot of you do, would love to work with you to do that. And so please, if it's something that you have an interest in, you know please reach out to us, and we'll certainly schedule some time and have a conversation with you. We also want to encourage you folks to be a thought leader. One of the things that Agile does on a regular basis is send out surveys, and surveys are important for a lot of reasons. Number one, it kind of tells us how you think we're doing, which is really important to us. Um, and also it kind of tells us how you're doing with Fleet Commander. So if you've taken our survey recently, you know that the first question we ask is, how are you doing and how can we help you? And that's very, very, very important. I can't stress the importance of it, because again, what it does is it helps us drive other things that we do within the organization and provide to you. So please, oh please, do participate in our surveys. I know an awful lot of you today are reference clients for Agile, and I certainly want to thank you for that. I think when we look at the number of clients that we have, probably close to 50% are references, for Agile, for Fleet Commander, and for the great work that we do. So if it's something that you'd like to help us along the way, and be a reference, or if you know somebody that has similar pains that you had, we're happy to talk to them as well. And then lastly, participate in various webinars and certainly user conference and other collaborations. Fleet Commander User Conference was a great hit this year. We did that in College Park, Maryland, at the UMD, on the UMD campus. University of Maryland campus. We had 21 different organizations participate. And so it was a great cross section of Agile clients. Um, and hopefully, as we gel plans for 2023, we'll see you there, and we'll be announcing that in the next probably 90 days or 60 to 90 days on those details. Resources. So again, from a resource standpoint, I think a lot of you know that there's lots and lots of online resources that Agile puts together on a monthly basis, or I should say on a regular basis. And again, you have access to all of these as an Agile client. And again, so whether it's the blogs, you can go to the Agile customer or just the blog page on Agile. And if you're looking for some very specific content around um, how do you change driver behavior, or reducing your personal vehicle cost, or odometer validation, there's a resource page, that you all have access to. So we encourage you to take advantage of that. The next thing is, kind of talking a little bit about, upcoming Agile Fleet webinars. So Kathy Wellick, who is a new, one of our new CS folks within Agile, she's going to take a minute and just talk about 100 Best Fleets. It's a program that, we would certainly encourage you to apply for if you haven't in the past, and a number of our Agile clients do that today. So Kathy, if you would give them a quick primer on this, and we'll finish up.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everybody. It is so nice to see everybody's online, all the names and so forth. As Joe said, I am fairly new to Agile Fleet. I'm just starting my second month. I was previously the fleet manager at Iowa State University, and I'm looking forward to bringing you a program on January 4th about the NAFA Top 100 Fleets. There have been some changes to the competition and so forth this year, so I'm going to be able to go over what the criteria is, where you can find the reports in your Agile system, and be able to fill out the recognition and application very easily. It's important to get your fleet recognized, and we want to tell your story as an Agile customer. We want to make sure that you're telling your successes and getting the recognition that you deserve. So I look forward to working with you on that, and please sign up on January 4th, and we will be sending an email out for that invitation. And Mike Brennan will also be joining us from NAFA's Top 100. Thank you.
Great, you're welcome. And again, we'll be sending out the invite shortly. That way you can kind of save the date. And, as Kathy mentioned, the meeting itself will be on the 4th from 2 to 3 Eastern. So, please try and attend. It's something that you should take advantage of, and, hopefully you can. And then lastly, Workshop Wednesday. So, we've been running Workshop Wednesday for pretty much a year. And we've had or at least we're getting really close to a year. Let me put it that way. But we had a really, really great 2022 of Workshop Wednesday. John, Rootchild, who a lot of we've tried to, create content for you to help you better understand Fleet Commander and the kinds of things that you can do with it. And um, as I mentioned, all of the content and all of the ideas, they really come from your feedback. So that's why it's very, very, very important for you to kind of tell us how you're doing. Where do you need the help? Because, that's where we're fundamentally trying to you know, get this information from and put some great content together for you. One of the things that I think you may have noticed is you know, in November, after we came back from user conference, we changed up Workshop Wednesday a little bit. And the reason for that is, um, you know, one of the things that we heard from a number of clients is they wanted some very periodic, how do I do this in Fleet Commander? It's more of the end user training. And so one of the things that we're really trying to focus on, with Workshop Wednesday is breaking up the content. So, part of it's going to be, specific, functions within Fleet Commander and how you manage those or how you use them more effectively. But also then, if you look at February, back to basics, we're going to be talking about managing users and managing vehicles. And then we're going to be talking about maintenance. And then we're going to be doing things about, kind of Fleet Commander quick pick and quick find. So, there's lots and lots of really great stuff planned, for 2023. And again, if you have specific comments about, gee, I really would like to know this, that, or the other thing, please tell us, because that's how it gets in here. And so we'll be sending the registration out for January very, very soon. And so we hope to see you then. And, just to kind of close out a couple last things, I think the vast majority of you folks know that, Agile has a great, truly great technical support team. Most things that come into technical support, get resolved within minutes, if not an hour at the most. And so, we've got a very high response rate, and we've got a great team of folks that are dedicated to helping you get the most out of your system. So, lots of experience in Fleet Commander. And the other thing too is that, if you do contact technical support, whether it's using the email or by phone, your cases are automatically generated and they're tracked through resolution. So we know exactly what's going on with it. And if there is something that we need to follow up on, we can. On the CS side, you know, um, as I mentioned, we've expanded the team, and Kathy is our our new attendee, or I should say, our new staff member. And so, we continue to grow the CS team, and we're here for you. That's our job. It's to help you. So anything that you need, if you have questions, if you need advice, if you're trying to figure out, how do I do this? How do other fleets do this? We've got enough skills within the team to help you out and to help you, get through those analysis. So, please feel free to reach out at your convenience. And, just lastly, again, different kinds of things. So, if you need assistance, excuse me one second. If you need assistance implementing new features, certainly you can reach out to CS. That's what we're here for, and we'll make sure that you get the right level of help based on what you need. Again, we've got extensive fleet industry experience to help you fine tune things. And, I think, when you look at Agile as a whole, we've got hundreds of years of fleet experience, throughout the company. And, probably within CS, um, we've certainly got well over 50 years. So a lot of us have been in this industry for a really, really, really long time. So there's probably something you may think, we haven't seen it. Yeah, chances are we have. So happy to help you as you need it. Fleet Commander refresher training. So a number of our clients are coming to us and saying, hey, I'm bringing on new staff, or, maybe the operations are finally coming back after COVID. We can set up structured refresher training with you in 2, 4, 8-hour blocks. And again, we can typically tailor it to your site or do it more general in nature. And again, so thinking about Workshop Wednesday, some of that training is going to be a little bit more general in nature, but, where you need specific training because of new staff or something very specific to your organization, we can help you there. Again, I mentioned previously, telematics. Integrating telematics is a great way to, fix that problem. You don't have to edit the data. You don't have to constantly update the data. And so we're looking, so again, if it's something from a telematics standpoint and you want to integrate it, please reach out to us. We can help you with a fresh start, if that's something you want to do, and take a look at it from an analysis standpoint, or just help you understand, what your data looks like. As I mentioned, we do offer webhooks with both GPSI and GeoTab today. Okay. They work a little bit differently, but, we're happy to have that conversation with you. And then on the fuel side, so, there's a lot of fuel imports that we do today, whether it's, bunkered fuel, so on-site tanks, or, commercial third party. So, there probably isn't one that we haven't seen there. And then again, I think a lot of folks are considering billing. And so, Fleet Commander, in one of the more recent changes, we came out with 5 standard algorithms. So if you do want to bill, and billing is really important in terms of cost recovery, you should take a look at that and really consider that, and we can help you down that road as well. And lastly, streamlining fleet sharing. Even though a lot of people think, maintaining your vehicle drives the lowest cost. Yeah, there may be an argument for that. While good maintenance is a great thing, if you have a lot of vehicles hanging around that aren't doing anything, your costs aren't optimized. And so you really need to think about how do you truly optimize your fleet. When you look at things like how do you share, how do you get vehicles out of department hands and really promote sharing, of those, whether it's, county, city, department, whatever assets, and certainly implementing, kiosks and boxes is a good way to do that. So it just makes it very, very easy. It simplifies it. It's all self-service. It takes the overhead out. It adds a lot of value to your organization. And then with that, are there any questions, John, that we need to address?
No, Joe, actually, there is not any in the chat beyond just
Okay,
to confirm that this deck and also the recording will be made available to everyone. We'll send out that link to y'all.
we
And
will.
speaking of links, when you do access the deck, the one that has the slide for Workshop Wednesday, all the past sessions, those will be linked directly to those sessions for you.
Great. With that, unless there are any other questions, we're pretty much at time for today. So I want to thank everybody again for taking time out of your busy days and attending. We hope that you found this of value to you, and certainly look forward to getting you all up on version 5.10. Um, and certainly, if you do have any questions, post meeting, please reach out to us.
Yep. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and happy holidays.